Hi, I'm Brian E. Denton, author of the book A Year of War and Peace and the poetry collection Spiration. Welcome to my channel. This video is part of a series I'm doing on Dante's Divine Comedy, wherein I am reading through the entire epic poem, all three books, the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, at a rate of 3 cantos or chapters per week. I'm doing this as a kind of independent contribution to Baylor University's 100 Days of Dante Project. If you haven't heard of Baylor University's 100 Days of Dante Project, please click through the link I provide down in the show notes. It's high quality stuff. I guarantee you're going to like it. If this is your first time visiting my channel, welcome. And I would ask that you please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Last month, the month of October, we set the goal of getting up to 200 subscribers, and I'm happy to report that we hit that goal. So the new goal for November is going to be to get up to 250 subscribers. So by the end of November, I'd like to be at 250 subscribers. And with your help, I'm sure we can get there. So thanks a lot in advance for that. A quick note on the organization of these videos. What you'll find is an initial introduction, which is what we're doing right now. This will be followed by a synopsis, where I will cover the basic plot and action of the canto under discussion. Then I'll do a characters and themes section. And then a takeaway section, wherein I offer my own personal thoughts on the canto and how we can use the canto to live better lives ourselves. Then I'll wrap things up with an outro. And then after that, we'll just go wherever the YouTube algorithm takes us. So let's get right into it then. Dante's Inferno, Canto 23. You know you're in trouble when you've taken part in the humiliation and embarrassment of an infernal beast. And the best thing to do in this situation is simply to run, which is exactly what Dante and his guide Virgil do at the opening of today's chapter. Yes, at the start, they waste a little bit of time pondering their situation as they engage in this kind of meandering perambulation towards the sixth ditch of Mabolge. But as soon as they hear those wings of the Malebranche flapping after them, they jump right down into that sixth ditch, which isn't the best place to be, but it's certainly better than being on the taloned grasp of one of these Malebranche characters. Fortunately for our two heroes, the Malebranche cannot escape the limits of the fifth ditch, so for right now at least, Dante and Virgil are safe. And within this relative safety, they start to get a good look at the sinners who are collected down here in the sixth ditch of Mabolge. And what they find is that these sinners are slowly making their rounds around the sixth ditch, and they're dressed in extravagantly beautiful robes. Real Cosmo Kramer, Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat type stuff going on here. But, as these are the hypocrites, while their public-facing sides of the robes are very extravagant and beautiful, the inner, personal-facing side is very heavy, and it weighs them down. In fact, these robes are almost incapacitatingly heavy, and that's why these sinners are walking so slow. They're just suffering under the weight of the robes that they have to wear. Naturally, these are sinners that our two heroes would really like to get to know, so they start talking to two of them. And these two are, as it turns out, friars. So once again, a little bit more anti-clericalism from Dante. The first friar is Friar Catalano. The second friar is Friar Lodoringo. Again, I can never pronounce these names. Friar Catalano starts to introduce himself and the other sinners collected down here, but Dante interrupts him. Dante starts talking. But then Dante is interrupted himself as he spots a man who's splayed out on the ground here in the sixth ditch. Indeed, this is a curious sight. This guy is not only splayed onto the ground, he's crucified to it. This, we learn, is Caiaphas, the high priest who helped convince the Pharisees and then the Romans to crucify Jesus Christ. At this point, Friar Catalano tells Virgil and Dante that all of the bridges that traverse or formerly traversed the sixth ditch of Mabolge have collapsed. Needless to say, this really upsets Virgil because he was told by the Malebranche that only one of those bridges collapsed and that they would be able to cross over on the next one. Lying bastards. But not to worry, Friar Catalano to the rescue. He tells our two heroes that there is a spot where they can get out of the sixth ditch if they so choose, which they do, and they head off in that direction, Virgil leading the way, but he's stalking mad, and he's angry, and he's upset. First, I really hope everyone caught that perfect stoic depiction of anger. Recall that when we were dealing with the sinners of violence, we reviewed Seneca's De Ira, where he says that anger arises from an individual's assent to an impression of injury and then a desire to do violence to another as a result of that impression of the injury. And that's exactly what happens here. Dante thinks to himself, reflecting on what occurred in the previous canto, that he took part in making these infernal beasts look ridiculous. And just like Jack Woltz, infernal beasts in their position can't afford to be made to look ridiculous. So they're probably going to be feeling insulted and hungry for blood. And indeed, this is exactly what happens. The Malebranche fly in for blood. Dante writes, "I thought it's our fault they have been cheated, and with such hurt and shame, I'm sure it must enrage them. If rage is added to their malice, they will pursue us still more cruelly than the hound that sets his fangs into a hare." Only it's too late, though. Just in the nick of time, as the Malebranche are closing in, our two heroes jump down into the sixth ditch of Maubeuge and into relative safety. And in this ditch, who do they find but the sinners of hypocrisy? Now, I really want to talk about Virgil. In my opinion, he's really the star of the show in this canto, but we definitely have to first talk about these hypocrites, because after all, this is the sin being punished in the sixth ditch. Hypocrisy is the public display of morality by a privately immoral person. It's the opposite of truthfulness, wherein one presents oneself true in both word and deed. The contrapasso in this canto, then, is actually quite obvious, and it concerns the robes that these sinners are wearing. You'll recall from the synopsis, where I described the robes, outwardly at least, as being very beautiful, but inwardly, they're very, very heavy, and oppressively so, actually. The sinners find it very difficult to walk and function as a result of having to wear these outwardly beautiful robes. This fits, actually, because living a lie, as these hypocrites do, makes it very difficult to live fluidly and act quickly, because you've told so many lies that you have to keep track of in order to keep up with the false self that you're presenting to the world. You live in fear of being found out and unable to make the moves that you otherwise would be able to make had you not told these lies about yourself. Okay then, let's start with Virgil. This is where it gets really interesting, for me at least. As a character, he's having a very difficult time of it. Things start out pretty bad for him in this canto, because things have been going bad for him in previous cantos. He starts out this canto by plodding along in a silent fashion, with Dante following him. And the reason I think that he is so silent and so brooding is he's once again disappointed in himself for failing to secure safe passage through hell. This is what he was tasked to do, and this is what he continues to fail at. We've seen many instances now of him failing to get safe passage through hell. So he's probably feeling a little bit depressed about that. Then there's his response to Caiaphas. Did you notice the way that he, Virgil, responds to looking at this guy for the first time? Dante the poet writes, "I saw that Virgil marveled at the sight of this shape stretched as on a cross, so ignoble in his eternal exile." Remember that Virgil has been to hell twice now, so far as we know. And not only that, but he's also seen new things this particular time through hell with Dante. And none of these things provoked this marveling look that he gives Caiaphas. So the way he looks at Caiaphas, I think, is very important. There is no sloppy, meaningless coincidence in great works of art like Dante's Divine Comedy. Dante wrote this stanza for a reason. Some commentators think that what Virgil is marveling at, he's doing it out of a kind of perturbed, grieving way, because he realizes at this moment that he just narrowly escaped obtaining paradise. And here's why. Virgil died in 19 BC, which means he just missed out on the saving presence of Christ in his life. And what's more is if you look at his poetry, what you'll find, as many medieval scholars did, is that sometimes his poetry can be read as prophesizing the coming of Christ. Here he is in the Eclogues speaking of the birth of a special boy. "Only do thou, at the boy's birth, in whom the iron shall cease, the golden race arise, befriend him, chaste Lucina. 'Tis thine own Apollo reigns, and in thy consulate this glorious age, O Pollio, shall begin, and the months enter on their mighty march. Under thy guidance, whatso tracks remain of our old wickedness, once done away, shall free the earth from never-ceasing fear. He shall receive the life of gods, and see heroes with gods commingling, and himself be seen of them, and with his Father's worth, reign o'er a world at peace." Then there's the case of Neptune's speech at the end of Book 5 of the Aeneid. Here, Venus has just prayed to Neptune that Neptune allow the safe passage of the Trojans to Tiber. And Neptune complies with this request, saying that he's cared for Aeneas in the past, just witness Aeneas' battle with Achilles, and that he's going to do it again. But Neptune does have one line at the end of his speech that is relevant for our purposes. And he tells Venus that the Trojan passage won't be completely safe. There will be a price to pay. Only one will be lost, one you'll seek at sea. One life for the lives of many men. One life for the lives of many men. Sound familiar? I'm sure it sounded familiar to Virgil, who wrote it, but now, down in the sixth ditch, just moments before marveling at Caiaphas, he hears from the mouth of Friar Catalano the words describing that hypocritical scribe. The man you see nailed down advised the Pharisees it was the better course that one man should be martyred for the people. One man should be martyred for the people. So we see this line from Dante, and then we also see the two lines from Virgil's poetry, kind of prophesizing the coming of Christ. So it should come as a little surprise then that Virgil is marveling at Caiaphas. And keep in mind the expression that Dante the poet uses to describe Caiaphas's punishment while Virgil is marveling. Dante writes of that punishment using the expression "leat eterno esilio," eternal exile. And this is important because Dante will once again use this very same expression and only one other time, much later in the poem, actually in the next book, Purgatorio, and he's using it to describe Virgil's own punishment in limbo. In fact, this language of eternal exile will be placed into Virgil the character's mouth in Purgatorio. So he must be realizing, as he looks at Caiaphas, that he just missed out. That's why he's marveling in grief. Finally, one last thing on Virgil's very bad day in hell, and that's the mocking that he endures at the hands of Friar Catalano. Keep in mind that Virgil and Dante have just had to run away and escape the Malebranche who were coming to kill them. Now, why were the Malebranche coming along to kill them? They were coming along to kill them because Virgil, in his infinite wisdom, made a deal with the Malebranche to get passage to the sixth ditch of Mabolge. He was told that only one of the bridges had collapsed and that one just around the corner was still available and he could traverse the sixth ditch there if only he goes with these few Malebranche. But how could he ever have guessed that the Malebranche would be lying to him? I mean, after all, these are the infernal beasts of fraud. Friar Catalano then properly mocks Virgil. He says to him essentially, well, I mean, it's not your fault. How could you know that you were being lied to? It's only the case that the devil is the father of all lies. And so Virgil just kind of pouts his way out of the sixth ditch of Mabolge. Because really, with this move of trusting the Malebranche, he's made himself into the Tom Brady of gullibility. He's just out there collecting rings. Rings of hell. Sorry. Well, I'm already in trouble for throwing out a bad dad joke, so at this point I might as well throw out what many of you would consider to be a bad take. And that take is this. Maybe Dante should have chosen a better Roman language artist to serve as his guide through hell. And here is where I will conclude this characters and themes section. Seneca would have been a better guide for Dante. Here's the most searing of early Roman Imperium hot takes. Seneca's plays are much better reading than the Aeneid. Yeah, I said it. At me on Twitter. Disappointment is a constant in life. It arises more often than the sun. We see this with Virgil today. You know, he's tasked with guiding Dante through hell, but though he has kept Dante safe, he's failed on numerous occasions, and we see how this failure has saddened him. Dante writes that Virgil stalks off with long strides and wears anger upon his face. Dante follows the imprints of his cherished friends. For today's takeaway, what I would like to suggest is that when we fail in life, which we all will do, and in fact for me it's an almost hourly occurrence, this failure, but when we do that, we don't copy Dante and follow the imprints of the cherished friend Virgil and stalk off in sadness with faces of anger. Instead, take a few moments for yourself to reflect on what went wrong. So take a walk, meditate, fart into your couch for a few minutes, whatever makes you comfortable. And while you're doing this, think about what is upsetting you about your failure. And all the while, keep in mind the wise words of another great Roman, Marcus Aurelius, who writes, "Do not be disgusted, discouraged, or dissatisfied if you do not succeed in doing everything according to right principles. But when you have failed, return again. And be content if the greater part of what you do is consistent with man's nature, and love that to which you return. Alright, so that concludes my video for Canto 23 of Dante's Inferno. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. As I mentioned in the introduction, in the month of November, we're trying to get up to 250 subscribers. Last month, October, we were trying to get up to 200, and we made that goal. So thanks for everyone who subscribed. I really appreciate it. And moving forward, anyone who newly subscribes, I thank you for that as well. But more importantly than getting likes and subscriptions is getting a conversation going in the comments section. We've already got a pretty healthy discussion going on, and I'm very thankful for that. But for anyone new, I'm also interested in what you have to say. So let me know your opinions on the canto or on the poem, or my opinion on the canto or the poem. Very interested to hear what you got to say. Other than that, you can contact me on Twitter at Brian E. Denton. These videos are going to be released every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So the next video is going to be released on Wednesday. Until then, take care of yourselves and others. Then there's the passage from the Aeneid. Aeneid? No. Virgil died and... Focus.